We all knew this was a complete mismatch before the fight happened, and this was a cherry pick from David Haye. And now after the fight, it was a mismatch, and it was just a cherry pick that went completely wrong, horribly wrong. And now we're left with a situation where Tony Bellew is saying that he's got a better win over David Haye than Wladimir Klitschko has. He managed to do what Wladimir Klitschko couldn't do and stop David Haye. None of them, him or Eddie Hearns, acknowledging that David Haye was injured from the 6th round and he could barely stand. And now we've got the joke of Tony Bellew calling out Deontay Wilder. We've got enough problems with Deontay Wilder fighting a credible opponent than Tony Bellew throwing his name into the mix. And the other joke of it is Tony Bellew's actually got a better name on his resume and a better resume than Deontay Wilder now. I mean, you couldn't make this stuff up. It was crazy. This was a cherry pick that went horribly, horribly wrong. I watched polls for this fight, and no one thought Tony Bellew had a hope in hell. It was the most one-sided polls going into any pay-per-view fight I've ever seen for a few years anyway. Now I just want to go over the actual fight and what actually happened. When I was watching this fight and the first bell started and David Haye came out and it was swinging and off balance, he looked like he was going to fall over, missing horribly, putting combinations together horribly, way off with his punches. His timing looked shot. I was sitting there watching and saying, how can he look this shot? What is he doing? Why is he being so careless? I couldn't understand what was going on. I'd watched fights with Chisora and Wladimir before this. I know, and I watched the Gerald fight and the Demori fight. I knew there was a chance. Yeah, okay. Obviously, he's going to decline from then to being 36. His speed was going to go down slightly. His reflexes were going to go down slightly. His timing would be off slightly. Of course it would, over that period of time. But by that much, no, it was completely unbelievable. It just couldn't happen. And then it got into the second half of the second round. I mean, Tony Bellew had been winning. He'd been, outboxing a wild fight in David Haye that looked completely shot before then. But in the second half of the second round, David Haye started to fight more sensibly. He didn't just go and swing in. He tried to counter Tony Bellew better. He obviously, you looked at him and he still didn't have the speed and timing that he did before. He wasn't moving the round right. But David Haye started to pace himself a bit better. He started putting his shots a bit better together. He's being patient, and then Tony Bellew just couldn't hit him with anything clean after that at all. And David Haye was landing shots on Tony Bellew. And I think it got into the 5th or the 6th round, I noticed that Tony Bellew started to look like he was tiring. His work rate had fallen and he was tired. And David Haye's mouth was shut, didn't look tired whatsoever. And it was pretty clear by then that I could see David Haye was hitting him with better shots and that the fight was going to be stopped within the next couple of rounds because David Haye was going to stop Tony Bellew. And then it went completely wrong halfway through, or I think the first minute of the 6th round. Tony Bellew fell down. David Haye's leg went. He went to the side of the ropes, and as soon as Tony Bellew got up from a slip, David Haye went wild at him again because everyone had pointed out by now, and it was obvious to everybody there was something wrong with David Haye. His leg had went, and he was falling over, just throwing massive amount of punches, hooks, uppercuts, everything he could. He was throwing the kitchen sink at Tony Bellew, and he couldn't get him out. And I knew right then, I thought, right, 6th round, it's going to be stopped. They're going to throw in the towel. There's no way he can hardly walk. There's no way he can continue this fight, and he did continue with the fight, amazingly. Some people even thought he won rounds after that, even though he could hardly walk. His right leg was gone, the leg that generates all the power for his punches. He could hardly stand up. He was off balance. He had to always make sure he was near the ropes, so if he was going to go off balance, he could go into the ropes, and it was a complete mess. And Tony Bellew still couldn't put David Haye down, even though he was shooting shots at just a stationary target now. They could just move his head. and fire backs through some pathetic arm punches at him. And the fight eventually did get stopped when David Haye fell down, got knocked down for the second time. He got up. I was worried he wasn't going to get up though, but his corner threw in a towel. There was no way he could knock him out now. He couldn't get any power in his shots, and he couldn't win in the judges' scorecards now. I had him winning the second round to the fifth round clearly, and then some people had Haye winning rounds after that, but I couldn't see anything I could give Haye after that. Tony Bellew won the first round. I think he was landing the better shots. David Haye was just going completely wild. Anyway, after the fight, I just couldn't believe Haye could be that shot, even in the first 6 rounds. There was just no way. Even from the second half of the second round to the sixth round, he looked shot. He looked awful. And I just kept looking everywhere. David Haye, I knew as soon as the fight stopped that he couldn't say he was injured. He didn't have that option anymore. He said it too often. He got ridiculed for it after the Wladimir Klitschko fight for talking about his toe being swollen. So after searching all Sunday, I eventually came across one guy giving an interview on IFL TV, and yeah, he had some inside knowledge of what went on. Shane McGuigan and David Haye still haven't made any statement yet, but he was saying, yeah, there was an injury. You don't go and borrow your friend's plane to go to Europe to see your doctor just for the hell of it, to have some pizza. Obviously there was a problem there, and people are saying, well, why didn't David Haye pull out before the fight started? And he didn't have the option anymore. This was the first pay-per-view since he fought Wladimir Klitschko. He would have lost all fans and credibility. There would be no big box office fights after this. He wouldn't be able to get any big fight after this if he pulled out in the week before, or the days run up to a fight of this magnitude. I don't know what it did in the pay-per-view, but this fight, I think, brought about 7 or 8 million purse for, and that's in British pounds, for Haye and Bellew to be shared between them. So this was a massive money fight, and he would have no chance of getting a fight like this again if he pulled out a few days before. No big name would go into a 8 or 12 week camp to fight David Haye, knowing that there's a good chance he could pull out before the fight just because he gets an injury. So he had no option. David Haye had to go into this fight with the injury, and the reason why he was swinging so wildly in the first round was because he was trying to protect that foot. He couldn't. The reason he looked off balance and he was so wild with his punches is he couldn't move around on his feet like he could. David Haye needs his footwork to perform well in the ring, and he just didn't have it. The injury was preventing him right from the very start. That wasn't the best David Haye, even at 36 we were seeing from the first to the sixth round. That was an injured David Haye even then, even though the injury did get worse in the sixth round. Clearly, obviously, everyone can see that. And he was swinging so wildly and trying to get David Haye out of there in the first few rounds, not just because anyway, that he was so angry with Tony Bellew, or the perception of he was being angry with Tony Bellew in the lead up to the fight, but because he knew that injury could go at any time, and if that injury went, he had very little chance of being able to win the fight against Tony Bellew, even in a complete mismatch that he was in against Tony Bellew. So he went wild, he looked pathetic, he was off balance, he was missing by miles, practically falling over because he was just trying to get Tony Bellew out there in the first few rounds before his leg went. As soon as it was clear in the second round that wasn't going to happen, he started to just try and outbox and be sensible and cross his fingers that it wouldn't go. And he'd be able to eventually keep calm, and the knockout would eventually come. As long as he was outboxing Tony Bellew, he would eventually come the time where he would get Tony Bellew in the right place at the right time to land the blow that would stop the fight for him. And that didn't work either. The plan was going perfectly from the second half of the second round to the sixth round until his leg completely went. And I'm surprised they didn't pull him out after that, but I think it would have been embarrassing if they pulled him out right then. And David Haye still did have a chance. I mean, he still had his moments after the sixth round, and he was, I think, 3 rounds up going into the sixth round, I think, anyway. So he had a chance, and it didn't work after he got knocked down twice. There was no way it was going to happen. But a lot of people aren't giving that side. They aren't. People are thinking that's David Haye completely shot, and he still could come back. He's had surgery on his Achilles right after the fight. I'm not sure he had the surgery even booked in before the fight happened. He could have. Usually, when you get that kind of damage to your Achilles, they plaster your leg up, and they try and correct it, plaster your leg up, and then 4 months to a year later, they make a decision if you're going to have surgery after that. But they went right for the surgery, which is the best thing. So hopefully we see David Haye a bit quicker, but it looks like a year, maybe a bit less than a year till we see David Haye fight again. David Haye's career from now on is Russian roulette, really. I mean, he could fight a top 10 guy next, destroy him easily, get into another good fight that he's got a very good chance of winning. And the same thing could happen again. It's completely Russian roulette from now on. David Haye's body is his own enemy now. He's still strong, he's still powerful, he's still quick. He can still fight a lot better than he did in them first 6 rounds of that fight. Definitely. But if he gets an injury right now, it's Russian roulette. You never know when it's going to happen. Could happen in the fight, could happen a few days before the fight. And no one knows his history right now as well. Has he been healthy the past 3 years? Has he known full well this whole time? He just needed to get the money, knowing his body wasn't 100% right. Who knows? But I mean, I hope he does come back. As a year ago, it really looked like we had a very strong heavyweight division. We had a lot of good past champions with Wladimir Klitschko, David Haye, Tyson Fury, and everything. I'm going to do a whole different video on that anyway. But I just wanted to get my views of the fight from Saturday night. Tony Bellew won fair and square. He won fair and square against an injured David Haye, though. That was not 100% David Haye at all. He never beat a healthy David Haye. Even a 36-year-old healthy David Haye did not beat. So that's all I've got to say.